She pressed both hands over her own mouth so her father's men wouldn't hear her breathing, and swore to whatever god still listened that she would rather die on this road than be dragged back and married to a man who had already paid for her. Amelia Hartwell was 22 years old, and tonight her father had put a price on her, like she was a horse at auction. So she ran. She ran into the dark. And she climbed into the wrong carriage, not knowing the man inside was the very duke her father had chosen. If a story about a woman who refused to be owned means something to you, take 1 second right now and subscribe. It truly helps me keep telling these. And in the comments, tell me the city you're watching from so I can see how far Amelia's story travels tonight. Now let's begin. Amelia Hartwell had learned by the age of 22 that a woman could be surrounded by servants, silk, silver, and warm fires, and still be as owned as any beast in her father's stable. She had learned it slowly, the way you learn a thing you do not want to know. First in glances, then in the way men lowered their voices when she entered a room, then tonight in the plainest words a man had ever spoken to her. "It's arranged," her father had said. "You'll thank me one day." She would not thank him. She had told him so. And he had struck her across the face for it, the first time in her life he had ever raised his hand, and in the silence that followed, with her cheek burning and her ears ringing, Amelia Hartwell had understood two things at once. She was not a daughter. She was a payment. So she ran. She ran out of the estate through the kitchen door because the front was watched. She ran past the stables where the grooms were already saddling horses at her father's shout. She ran down the long carriage road toward Ashford Crossing, with her good boots filling with rainwater, and her dark green dress turning black and heavy at the hem, and she did not look back because looking back was how they caught you. "Bring her back!" Her father was roaring somewhere behind her. "Amelia! Amelia!" She would not answer to her own name. Not tonight. Tonight her name was the thing they were hunting. The rain came down in sheets. It was summer, late July, the kind of thick Virginia summer where the heat sat on your chest all day and then broke open at night into storms that flattened the corn. Lightning turned the road white for half a heartbeat, and in that half heartbeat she saw them. Two carriages stopped at the way station ahead, horses steaming in the wet. One bore her father's crest on its door. That would be the carriage sent to carry her to her wedding. She would sooner drown. The other was dark, unmarked. No crest, no color, nothing at all. The sort of carriage a man rides in when he does not want to be known. Behind her hooves. Close now. Very close. She did not think. There was no time left in the world for thinking. She reached the unmarked carriage, tore the door open with hands that had gone numb, and threw herself inside. She pulled the door shut behind her, pressed her spine against it, and realized in the black interior that she was not alone. A man sat across from her. She could not see his face, only the shape of him, still unhurried. One gloved hand resting on the head of a walking cane, the other laid flat and calm across his knee. He did not startle. He did not reach for her. He did not call out. He simply said in a low and even voice, "You are in the wrong carriage." Amelia's whole body had gone rigid. Her heart was slamming so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Outside, muffled by the rain, she heard the voices of her father's men, near then nearer. "Please," she breathed. It was the only word she had. "Please." The man did not move. "You're bleeding." "I'm not." "Your lip." A pause. "You're bleeding on my seat." She pressed the back of her wrist to her mouth, and it came away dark. She had not even felt it. She had not felt anything since the moment her father's hand had cracked across her cheek. Only the running, only the rain, only the animal certainty that stopping meant ending. "There are men out there," she whispered, "looking for me. I can hear them. If they find me here, they won't look in this carriage." Something in the flat certainty of it made her go still. Why not? The man leaned forward just slightly, and for the first time, the storm's gray light found half his face, a jaw like something carved, eyes the color of cold iron, and no fear in them at all. He looked at her the way a man looks at a card he has already decided how to play. Because, he said, no one searches the Duke's carriage. The word went through her like the lightning had. Duke. She had heard that word only once tonight. She had heard it from her father's own mouth an hour ago in the study before the blow. The Duke of Ashford. It's arranged. She had not stayed to hear more. She had not wanted his name in her head. She had wanted to be gone before it could become real. And now she was sitting in the dark, dripping rainwater onto the seat of a carriage that belonged to No, she said. The man tilted his head. No, you're... Her voice failed. She started again. What is your name? You climbed into my carriage, he said, and you're asking my name. What is your name? He was quiet a moment. Outside, a fist pounded on the door of the first carriage, her father's carriage, and a voice demanded to know if anyone had seen a young woman in a green dress. Amelia stopped breathing. The man across from her did not so much as glance toward the sound. Nathaniel, he said. Ashford. The last thin thread holding Amelia together snapped clean. She had run from a cage into a smaller one. She had run from the man who would sell her straight into the arms of the man who had bought her. Of all the carriages on all the roads in all of Virginia, she had chosen his, and the God she'd prayed to on the road had a crueler sense of humor than her father ever had. Get away from me, she said, and her hand went to the door latch behind her. They're right outside that door, Nathaniel Ashford said, not raising his voice, not moving an inch. You open it, they take you. That's not a threat. That's the road. You'd hand me over. I haven't. You will. If I meant to, he said, I would have opened my mouth the moment you fell through that door. I've had a dozen breaths to call out. Count them if you like. He settled back into the dark. I haven't spent a one. Amelia's fingers stayed on the latch. Her chest heaved. Rain hammered the roof of the carriage like fists. Why? She said. Why would you not call out? Because, Nathaniel said, I don't much care for the man hunting you either. The fist pounded again, closer now, on the carriage beside them. Voices. Her father's steward, she thought. Silas. She would know that voice in her sleep. She had heard it read out the accounts of the estate 1,000 times, cold and precise. A man who counted people the way he counted coin. Open it, Silas was saying. Every carriage, now. Amelia's eyes flew to Nathaniel's. For one long moment, neither of them moved. Then the Duke of Ashford reached up slow, unhurried, a man with nowhere to be, and rapped his cane twice against the roof. Driver, he called, and his voice changed. It went smooth, it went languid, it went bored, the voice of a man who has never in his life been told no. We're leaving. Sir, the driver called back through the rain. I said we're leaving. Now. I have no interest in sitting in a puddle while some Virginia squire misplaces his horse. Amelia stared at him. Sir, came Silas's voice, sharp, right outside the door now. Your pardon, but we're searching every... You'll search nothing of mine, Nathaniel Ashford said, and though his voice never rose, something in it dropped 10 degrees. Do you know whose carriage you're breathing on, sir? A pause. No, sir. Then you'll want to remove your hand from my door before you find out. Another pause. Longer. The rain filled it. And then, impossibly, the weight of the man against the door was gone, and the carriage lurched forward, wheels cutting into the mud horses, leaning into the storm, and the voices of her father's men fell away behind her, into the dark, and the rain, and the summer thunder. Amelia did not move for a long time. She could not. She sat pressed against the door with her wet dress clinging to her, and her split lips stinging, and her whole body shaking not from cold, though she was cold, but from the sheer staggering wrongness of where she now was. She had escaped. And she had not escaped anything. Sit down, Nathaniel said. I'm sitting. You're crouched against my door like a cat that's expecting to be kicked. Sit down. She did not sit down. Where is this carriage going? North. North where? Ashford Estate, by way of Boston Road. He turned his iron eyes on her. The same road I'd imagine your father meant to send you up. To me. Amelia's stomach turned over. You knew that my bride had run off into a thunderstorm rather than meet me. A thin, humorless curve of his mouth. I received the letter this morning. The arrangement. Your father's very generous terms. The word generous came out like something spat. I did not know she'd choose my carriage to run into. That Miss Hartwell is a detail even I couldn't have arranged. She flinched at her own name in his mouth. Don't call me that. It's your name. It's the name they're selling, she said. It's the name on the paper. Don't. Her voice cracked and she hated it, hated the crack, hated that he heard it. Don't call me that. Nathaniel Ashford studied her in the swaying dark for a long moment. What would you have me call you then? He said. Not gently, but not cruelly either. Something in between, something almost curious. Amelia, she said. Just Amelia. He inclined his head once, as if noting it down somewhere behind those cold eyes. Amelia, then. A beat. You should get warm, or you'll be no use to anyone, least of all yourself. He reached beside him, took up a heavy travel coat of dark wool, and held it out across the space between them. Amelia looked at the coat. She looked at his face. I don't want anything from you. It's a coat, not a wedding ring. He set it on the seat beside her when she would not take it. You're free to freeze on principle. It makes no difference to me. But you'll do your principled freezing quietly, because I've a headache, and the last thing I rode out into this storm to endure was conversation. She stared at him. You rode out into the storm, tonight, in this. I did. Why? Nathaniel was quiet. To avoid my own wedding, he said. The words landed in the dark between them and simply sat there. Amelia's mouth opened, closed, opened again. She could not make it fit. You're running too. I don't run, Nathaniel said, with the flat certainty of a man who had never once in his life had to. I leave. There's a difference, and it's mostly money. But something crossed his face when he said it, brief gone almost before it arrived, and for the first time since she'd fallen through his door, Amelia Hartwell saw a crack in the iron. She did not take the coat. But she stopped crouching against the door. She slid slowly down onto the seat. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The carriage rocked north through the storm. The wheels churned. Somewhere behind them, her father's men had given up or turned back or ridden the wrong way. She would never know which, and it didn't matter, because she was gone from that house now. Gone from that life, gone into a dark carriage with a man she was supposed to marry and had never wanted to meet. They'll come to your estate, she said finally. My father, he'll come for me there. It's the first place he'll look. Yes, and you'll give me back. I haven't decided. Nathaniel said, what I'll do with you. The words should have frightened her. Coming from any other man tonight, they would have. But there was something in the way he said them, decided what I'll do with you, that was so tired, so worn thin, that it did not sound like a threat. It sounded like a man who had spent his whole life being decided about trying out the words from the other side and finding they fit him badly. You say that, Amelia said slowly, like you don't enjoy it either. Nathaniel's iron eyes came up to hers. Enjoy what? He said. Owning things. People. She lifted her chin, though her lips still bled and her hand still shook. You say what I'll do with you like a man reading words in a language he hates. For a moment, just a moment, the Duke of Ashford looked at her, as though she had reached across the carriage and touched something that had not been touched in a very long time. Then the shutter came down again. You've had a hard night, Miss Amelia. He corrected himself. You should sleep. It's a long road to Boston and longer to my estate, and the last thing I need is you fainting in my carriage from cold and hunger and drama. I'm not going to your estate. You're already on the road to it. I'll get out at the first town. And go where? Nathaniel asked, not unkindly, which was worse than if he'd sneered. You've no money. I'd wager your father's men would have relieved you of it if you'd had time to take any. You've no name you can safely use. The moment you say Hartwell in any inn between here and Boston, someone sends a boy running for the reward. And you've no husband, no father, no brother to stand behind you because the only men in your life have spent the evening trying to sell you or catch you. He let that settle. So, the first town. Tell me, where do you go? Amelia said nothing, because there was nothing to say. He was right, and they both knew he was right, and the knowing of it sat in her chest like a stone. She had run. She had run so hard and so far into the storm that she had not once let herself think about the thing every runaway must eventually face, that away from is not the same as toward. She had known what she was fleeing. She had not the faintest idea what she was fleeing to. Her eyes stung. She would not cry. She had cried enough tonight in the study before the blow when she'd still believed her tears might move him. They had not. Tears were a currency her father did not accept. "I would rather die," she said very low, "than go back." "I heard you," Nathaniel said. "No." She looked up at him and her voice came out fierce and shaking all at once. "You heard the words. You didn't hear me. I would rather die. Do you understand? When I opened your door, I wasn't choosing your carriage over another. I was choosing the road over a rope. I was choosing the storm over a bed I'd rather drown than lie in. So when you sit there and tell me I've nowhere to go, I know. I've known for an hour. I ran anyway. Do you understand what it means when a person runs knowing there's nowhere to run to?" The carriage rocked. The rain fell. Nathaniel Ashford was silent for a long, long time. "Yes," he said at last, and his voice had changed. Gone quiet, gone stripped, gone honest, in a way it had not been before. "I understand it exactly." Amelia searched his face. "You do," she said. It was not quite a question. "I told you," he said. "I rode out into a thunderstorm to avoid my own wedding. Do you imagine I did that for sport? I don't know why you did it. I don't know anything about you except your name and that it's the worst name I've heard all night." Something almost like a laugh moved through him, a single breath gone fast. "That's fair." "So tell me," Amelia said, "since we're apparently to sit in this box together until Boston, tell me why the Duke of Ashford runs from his own wedding." Nathaniel looked out the window into the black and streaming dark. "Because," he said, "the wedding was never mine to run from or run toward. It was arranged before I was old enough to spell my own name. My father made it. Yours agreed to it. And when my father died 3 winters ago, the arrangement did not die with him. It came to me along with the debts and the estate, and every mouth on it that eats because I sign a paper. Do you understand what an estate is, Amelia? It's not a house. It's 400 souls who freeze if the roof isn't kept up, who starve if the accounts don't balance, who look at me the way you look at a wall you're leaning on in a storm, as the last thing between them and the cold." His jaw tightened. "And your father, Miss Hartwell, holds the note on half my father's debt. Did you know that?" Amelia went very still. "No," she whispered. "Of course you didn't. Why would he tell his daughter that she was the price of a debt cleaner to call it a match? Cleaner to call it love, even if he thought you'd swallow it?" Nathaniel's voice was flat and low and terrible in its calm. "But that's what it is. Marry his daughter, and the debt is forgiven. Refuse, and he calls it in, and 400 souls go hungry through the winter because their duke wouldn't marry a girl he'd never met." He finally turned his eyes back to her. "So no, I don't enjoy it. You had it right a while ago. I read those words in a language I hate, because I was sold to Amelia. The only difference between us is that no one had to strike me across the face to make me run. I did it quietly. I did it in a fine carriage, but I did it all the same." The silence after that was different from all the silences before it. Amelia sat with her ruined dress and her bleeding lip and her shaking hands, and she looked at the man across from her, the Duke. She had cursed the name. She had called the worst she'd heard all night, and something in her chest shifted, the way the storm outside had shifted, the way the whole world seemed to be shifting tonight all at once off its old and settled hinges. "So we're the same," she said slowly. "No," Nathaniel said. "We're not the same. You have less than I do, and you've been treated worse, and that matters." Don't let me pretend a fine carriage and a hungry heart are the same as a bruised face and an empty road. They aren't. She had not expected that. She had not expected from a man like this, from a duke, the plain acknowledgement that his suffering and hers did not weigh the same. It knocked something loose in her, some old hard armor she'd worn against men who used their own pain to excuse everything they did. But, he went on, we are pointed at the same wall. You, me, your father's men, the debt, the paper with both our names on it. We were all of us going to arrive tonight or next week or next month at the same door, where a girl who didn't want it and a man who didn't choose it were to be locked together for life so that 400 people could keep a roof and one old politician could keep his power. His mouth twisted. And by pure blind chance, in the middle of a thunderstorm, you climbed into the one carriage in Virginia where the man on the other seat already knew exactly how the trap was built, because he was standing in it too. Amelia let out a long, unsteady breath. I called your name the worst I'd heard all night, she said. You did. I didn't know you hated it as much as I did. For the first time, Nathaniel Ashford smiled, and it was not the thin, cold, practiced curve he'd given her before. It was smaller than that, and realer. It reached just barely the iron of his eyes. More, he said. I've had longer to hate it. The carriage rocked on through the summer storm. The rain began very slowly to ease, not to stop, but to lose its fury, settling into a steady drum on the roof, the kind of rain a person could think inside of. Amelia reached over at last and took up the heavy wool coat he'd set beside her. She did not thank him. She was not ready to thank him for anything. But she drew it around her shoulders, and it was warm, and it smelled of leather and old paper and wood smoke, and for the first time since her father's hand had crossed her face, she stopped shaking. Nathaniel watched her do it, and said nothing. Which was, she was beginning to understand his particular way of saying a great many things. How far to Boston? She asked, quieter now. 3 days, perhaps 4 in this weather. We'll stop at coaching inns along the road. And when we stop. Her fingers tightened in the wool. When we stop, and there are people, and my name. You won't use your name. Then what name do I use? Yours? I think that raises rather more questions than it settles. Something flickered across his face. She could not read it in the dark. We'll think of something. A cousin. A ward. A widow being escorted north. There are 100 lies a carriage like mine can tell, and no innkeeper in 3 states will question a one of them, because no innkeeper in 3 states wants to be the man who called a duke a liar. He said it without pride, almost with distaste, as though his own power were a thing he carried because he could not put it down. It's an ugly kind of safety, but it's safety. It's more than you had an hour ago on that road. An hour ago on that road, Amelia said, I had exactly one thing. I had my own 2 feet, and the fact that I chose to run on them. It wasn't safety, but it was mine. She met his eyes. Whatever we call me at the next inn, Cousin Ward Widow, I want you to understand that I am not choosing your carriage because I've nowhere else to go. I'm in it because I opened the door myself. Whatever happens after this on this whole road to Boston, I want it understood between us that I chose. Even if the only thing I get to choose is which cage I sit in tonight. Do you understand me, Nathaniel Ashford? He looked at her for a long moment. That, he said quietly, is the first thing anyone has said to me in 3 years that I'll remember tomorrow. That's not an answer. Yes, he said. I understand you. You chose. It's yours. A pause. It may be the only thing in this whole arrangement that belongs to either of us, so we'll guard it. Amelia sat back against the seat, the coat warm around her, the rain steady on the roof, the road unspooling north into the dark. She did not trust him. She was not fool enough for that, not tonight, not after the kind of night she'd had. A man could speak beautifully in a dark carriage and hand you over in the morning light. She had learned at 22 that men's words and men's deeds lived in separate houses, and that a wise woman watched the second and forgave herself for hoping about the first. But she watched him now. This duke, this bought and hollow man in his fine, unmarked carriage. The way he'd wrapped his cane and sent her father's men into the storm. The way he'd said, "You've been treated worse." And that matters, the way he'd handed her the coat and then looked away, so she wouldn't have to be watched while she took it. And she thought for the first time all night that perhaps the trap she'd stumbled into was not the trap she'd feared. "Sleep," Nathaniel said again, softer than before. "I'll wake you before the first inn. You'll need your wits for it, and you've spent most of them on me tonight." "And you?" "I don't sleep much," he said. "Haven't in 3 years." He turned his eyes back to the streaming window and the dark beyond it. "Someone in this carriage should stay awake and watch the road behind us. It may as well be the one who's used to it." Amelia drew the coat closer. Her eyes were heavier than she'd realized now that the shaking had stopped and the warmth had found her. The last of the fight was draining out of her body, leaving behind a bone-deep tiredness that even fear could no longer hold back. "Nathaniel," she said, half asleep already. "Amelia, if you hand me over in the morning," she murmured, "I want you to know I'll never forgive you. Not because you'll have broken a promise, you haven't made me any, but because for about 10 minutes tonight in this carriage, I let myself believe there was one man in Virginia who wouldn't." The Duke of Ashford was very still. "Then I suppose," he said so low she nearly missed it under the rain, "I'll have to make certain you never have cause." And as the carriage rolled north through the last of the summer storm, carrying a runaway heiress and the Duke her father had chosen, neither of them owned for the first time in either of their lives by anyone but each other's watching eyes. Amelia Hartwell closed her eyes and slept for the first time in months without dreaming of the auction block. Behind them, the road ran empty. Ahead of them, it did not. But that for tonight, she did not know. And Nathaniel Ashford, watching the dark behind them, with his cane across his knees, and her name turning quietly in his chest, did not yet have the heart to wake her and say so. The road ahead did not stay a secret long. Nathaniel Ashford saw the lanterns first. 2 of them swinging low and yellow through the thinning rain, blocking the road where it narrowed between 2 stone walls, a mile short of the first coaching inn. He did not wake Amelia. He watched. He counted. 2 lanterns meant 2 men at least, and men did not stand in the road at this hour in this weather for the good of their health. Then a 3rd lantern lifted, and a voice called out into the dark, and Nathaniel's blood went cold, because he knew that voice. "In the name of Magistrate Hartwell, halt your carriage." He reached across the space between the seats and closed his hand over Amelia's wrist. She came awake all at once, the way hunted things do, with a sharp, indrawn breath, and both hands flying up to defend herself before her eyes had even opened. "Don't," Nathaniel said low and fast. "Don't scream, don't move, listen to me. There are men in the road ahead. They're your father's." Amelia's face drained of everything. "He sent word ahead," she whispered. "Riders, faster than a carriage. Oh God, he sent riders." "He did. They'll search us. They'll try." Nathaniel was already moving, and moving fast, pulling the wool coat higher around her shoulders, pushing her down into the corner of the seat, tucking a fold of the heavy carriage curtain half across her, so that a lantern thrust through the window would find a huddled shape and not a face. "Listen to me, Amelia. Whatever I say out there, you say nothing. You are asleep. You are ill. You are my late brother's widow, and you are grieving, and the sight of a strange man's lantern in your face will make you weep, and no man alive wants to stand in the rain arguing with a weeping widow. Do you understand me? They'll know my voice." "Then don't give them one to know." His grip tightened on her wrist once hard, and then let go. "Trust me for the next 4 minutes, just 4. After that you can go back to not trusting me, and I'll not hold it against you. But for 4 minutes, Amelia be dead to the world." The carriage rolled to a stop. The rain drummed, and a fist hammered the door. "Out of the carriage!" a voice barked. "Both of you, magistrate's orders. We're searching every coach on this road for a runaway girl." Nathaniel did not open the door. He slid the window down 2 inches no more, and looked out at the man on the other side, with the flat, bored, faintly disgusted expression of a man being asked to do something beneath him. "You're searching what?" he said. "Every coach, sir. There's a girl fled her father's house tonight. Dark hair, green dress, Magistrate Hartwell's own daughter, and there's coin for the man who brings her back." "Is there?" Nathaniel let the silence stretch a beat too long. "And you thought you'd find a magistrate's daughter in the Duke of Ashford's carriage?" The lantern wavered. "The what, sir?" "You heard me the first time. I'll not say it twice into the rain." Nathaniel's voice never lifted, and that was the terrible thing about it, Amelia thought from her corner, that a man could make a threat sound like an inconvenience. "My seal is on the strongbox beneath the driver. My name is on the letters in my case, and you have stopped me on a public road in a storm to accuse me of hiding a runaway child under my seat. Shall I have my driver fetch the letters? Shall we do this properly? Because I'll want your name, soldier, and your captain's name, and the name of whatever fool sent armed men to lay hands on a peer's carriage in the dark." Amelia did not breathe. Through the crack of the curtain, she could see the man's face, and she watched it change, watched the greed for the reward, money curdle into something much older and much more useful to them, which was fear. Not fear of Nathaniel's fists, fear of Nathaniel's name, fear of the machinery a man like that could set turning against a man like him quietly, without ever raising his voice, until a soldier who'd wanted $20 found himself with no post and no pay and no way to explain how he'd lost them. "Who's in there with you then?" The man tried, but the fight had gone out of it. "The magistrate said the girl might have fallen in with someone, might have been took. In here," Nathaniel said, "is my brother's widow. She buried him 6 weeks ago. She has not slept a full night since. She is finally asleep, and if you put that lantern in her face and wake her to weeping, I will personally see that you spend the rest of your short career guarding a toll bridge in the mountains, where the only thing that passes is goats." A pause. "Or you can stand aside and let a grieving woman rest, and go tell your magistrate you searched the Duke of Ashford's coach, and found nothing but a widow and a foul temper. Your choice. I've all night. Have you?" The lantern lowered. "Beg pardon, sir. Meant no, go on. Go on through." "I intend to." The window slid shut. The carriage lurched forward. And Amelia Hartwell stayed exactly where she was, curled in the corner under the wool coat, until the lanterns had fallen away behind them, and the stone walls had opened back out into open country, and only then did she let out the breath she'd been holding for 4 minutes, and it came out shaking. "They were going to take me," she said. "They didn't. They were." She sat up, and her hands were trembling again, and she pressed them flat against her knees to stop them. "He sent riders ahead. On the road. My own father put a bounty on me. Coin for the man who brings me back. He said that. That soldier said that." Her voice climbed and cracked. "I knew he wanted me married. I didn't know he wanted me hunted. They are," Nathaniel said quietly, "very often the same thing. He didn't stop being your father when he decided to sell you. That's the part that never makes sense and never will. He'd swear on his life he loves you, and he does in the ruined way that men like that love things, the way a man loves a good horse he means to sell at a profit. Cared for, fed, groomed, and gone the moment the price is right." Amelia stared at him. "How do you know that?" she said. "How do you know exactly the way it feels?" "I've told you how. You told me your father made an arrangement. You didn't tell me he hunted you." Nathaniel was silent a moment. "No," he said. "Mine didn't hunt me. Mine did something worse. Mine made me grateful." His jaw worked. "He raised me to believe that being sold was an honor, that a marriage of debt and land and power was the highest thing a man of my name could aspire to, and that any softness in me that wanted otherwise was a weakness to be beaten out. And it was. Beaten out. Slowly. Cleanly. Without ever once leaving a mark a guest could see." He looked at her. "Your father raised his hand to you once tonight, and it drove you into a storm. Mine never raised his hand to me at all. He didn't need to. He got into my head instead. And I'll tell you which of those two things takes longer to run from Amelia. It's not the fist." The carriage rolled on. The rain had nearly stopped now, only a fine mist left drifting against the windows, and somewhere ahead, the first gray suggestion of the coaching inn's lights was rising out of the dark. "Then why did you come tonight?" Amelia said. "If he trained you so well. If you were grateful? Why were you on this road at all running, if running was beaten out of you?" Nathaniel looked out the window for a long moment. "Because 3 winters ago he died." He said, "And I found the account books, the real ones, not the ones he showed the family, the ones where I could see in his own hand exactly what I was worth to him down to the dollar, exactly what the marriage would bring, exactly how much of me he'd already spent before I was old enough to know I'd been spent." He turned back to her, and his iron eyes had something raw in them now, something he plainly did not show to many people, and perhaps had never shown to anyone. "I sat in his study for 3 days, reading those books, Amelia. And on the 3rd day, I understood that the man I'd spent my whole life trying to make proud had never once in 40 years of ledgers written my name in the column of things he loved, only in the column of things he owned, and it broke something in me, and it built something else." He was quiet. "I stopped being grateful. That's what happened tonight. 3 years late, but it happened. I read the letter your father sent and the terms, and I looked at the paper that was going to marry me off exactly the way he'd have wanted, and I thought no, not to honor his memory. Not for 400 souls, even though, God help me, I don't yet know what I'll do about them. I thought no, the way a man says it who has never once in his life been allowed to. And I called for the carriage, and I rode out into the storm, and I did not have the first idea where I was going. A short, broken breath that was almost a laugh. And then you fell through my door. And it turned out I wasn't the only one on this road who'd finally learned to say it." Amelia did not speak for a long time. "I thought you were the villain of my story," she said at last. "When you told me your name, I thought of every carriage in Virginia God has put me in the one belonging to the man who bought me. I thought you were the worst thing that could happen to me tonight." "I might still be," Nathaniel said. "Don't decide too fast. You've known me an hour. Men have been kind for an hour before and cruel for a lifetime after. You keep doing that." "Doing what?" "Warning me not to trust you." She tilted her head, studying him. "A man who wanted to trick me wouldn't keep telling me not to be tricked." Or, Nathaniel said, "A man who wanted to trick you would tell you exactly that, knowing it would make you trust him faster." Amelia opened her mouth, closed it. "You're impossible," she said. "I'm careful," he corrected. "There's a difference, and you'd do well to learn it because you've spent tonight being neither. You ran without a plan. You climbed into an unmarked carriage without knowing who was in it. You told the man your father sold you to that you'd rather die than go back, which I'd point out is precisely the sort of thing a clever villain would want to know, since it tells him you'll do anything, agree to anything to avoid it." He let that land. "You've been very brave tonight, Amelia. You've also been very reckless. And the two are going to keep looking like the same thing right up until the moment they don't." She sat with that. She wanted to argue. She found she couldn't because he was right, and being right was becoming his most infuriating habit. "Then teach me," she said. Nathaniel blinked. "What? You said I've been reckless. You said I should learn to be careful. So teach me. We've 3 days to Boston and a father's men on every road. If you truly don't mean to hand me back, and I don't yet believe you. But if then I need to be more than a widow, you hide under a curtain. I need to be able to lie the way you lie. Cold, bored, without blinking. I watched you turn that soldier into a puddle with nothing but your voice." Her chin came up. "I want to be able to do that." Something shifted in Nathaniel's face. Surprise first. Then something warmer and more dangerous to both of them that he pushed down almost as fast as it rose. "That," he said slowly, "is the first sensible thing you've said all night. You keep saying that too. You keep surprising me. It's becoming a problem." He settled back. "Very well. Lesson 1. When we reach that inn and we're minutes from it, you will not be a Hartwell, and you will not be a widow either. Widows draw sympathy, and sympathy draws questions, and questions are the last thing we want. You'll be my ward. Your ward. My late guardian's granddaughter. Orphaned. In my care until you come of age. It's dull, it's respectable, and it explains everything: why you travel with me, why you've no husband, why you defer to me in public and no one thinks twice. He held up a gloved finger before she could object. In public. What you are in this carriage is your own affair and none of theirs. But out there, you are quiet. You are grateful you keep your eyes down and you let me do the talking. Can you do that? Or does the woman who told me she chose her own cage bristle too much at the word ward to keep herself out of a real one? Amelia's jaw tightened. Everything in her rebelled at it, at eyes down, at grateful, at quiet, at handing this cold man the reins of her own name yet again, after she'd spent the whole night ripping them out of her father's hands. And then she thought of the lantern, the bounty, the 4 minutes she'd spent as dead to the world. I can do it, she said, for 4 minutes at a time, in public, because I choose to, not because you told me to. I'll take it, Nathaniel said. It's more than most people manage. The carriage slowed. Voices rose ahead, an ostler, a stable boy. The ordinary human sounds of an inn coming awake to receive a late arrival. Nathaniel reached up and rapped his cane once against the roof, and the carriage rocked to a halt, and the whole warm, dangerous world of other people came rushing in at them through the walls. Eyes down, he murmured. Grateful, quiet, and Amelia. He caught her gaze one last time before the door opened. If it goes wrong in there, if someone recognizes you, or the magistrate's men have already sent word ahead, or I misjudge it, you do not run. Do you hear me? Whatever your feet tell you, you do not bolt for the door. You come to me. You take my arm. You let the whole room watch you take the arm of the Duke of Ashford, because a girl who runs looks guilty, and a girl on a duke's arm looks like she belongs to him, and belonging to me is the safest thing you can be tonight, even though I know it's the last thing you want to be. His voice dropped. Can you do that? Can you come toward me when everything in you is screaming to run? Amelia looked at him. Her heart was pounding again. But it was a different pounding than the fear on the road. That may be harder, she said honestly, than the 4 minutes. I know it, Nathaniel said. That's why I asked. The door opened. The innkeeper was a broad, anxious man, with a lantern and a great deal of bowing, and the moment he understood whose carriage had rolled into his yard, the bowing doubled. Nathaniel stepped down first, unhurried, and turned to hand Amelia out with a courtesy so smooth and so cold that it fooled even her for half a second, and she took his hand and stepped down as his ward eyes lowered and let him settle her cloak, his coat still around her shoulders, and did not say a single word. And it was the hardest silence she had ever kept in her life. Miss Ashford has traveled a long road, and a hard one. Nathaniel told the innkeeper in a voice that suggested any further questions would be a personal affront. She'll want a private room afire and no visitors. I'll take the room adjoining. See that a girl brings her supper up, and that no one else troubles her. Is that understood? Of course, your grace, of course, at once. And a word. Nathaniel's voice did not change, but something in it made the innkeeper go still. Has anyone come through tonight asking after a young woman magistrate's men? Riders. Anyone bearing Hartwell's name? The innkeeper's eyes flicked once to Amelia, a flick so fast she almost missed it, and then away. Riders came through not 2 hours past, your grace, he said carefully. Left word. Coin for anyone who's seen a magistrate's daughter. Dark-haired girl, green dress. A pause that lasted a lifetime. I told them I'd seen no such thing. Nathaniel did not move. Amelia did not breathe. And have you? Nathaniel asked softly. The innkeeper looked at the Duke. He looked at the pale, silent, dark-haired girl in the dark green dress, standing at the Duke's side under a borrowed coat, and there was not a soul in that yard who could have failed to do the arithmetic, and the innkeeper did it right there in front of both of them. And then he looked back at Nathaniel Ashford, and something passed between the two men, some old unspoken understanding of the world and how it worked and who in the end held the whip. "Know your grace," the innkeeper said. "I've seen no such girl. Only your ward, Miss Ashford, who's had a hard road and wants her rest." He bowed again lower than before. "The private room's the best in the house. Right this way." Amelia's knees nearly gave out. She did not let them. She kept her eyes down and her mouth shut, and her hand light and steady on Nathaniel's arm, and she walked into the inn a ward and not a runaway. And it was not until the private door was shut behind them and the innkeeper's footsteps had faded down the stair that she let go of the arm and sat down hard on the edge of the narrow bed and put her face in both her hands. "He knew," she said muffled. "He knew. He looked right at me. Green dress, dark hair. He knew exactly who I was." "Yes," Nathaniel said, "and he lied for you. And he lied for the reward he'd rather have than the one your father offered." Nathaniel crossed to the window and looked down into the yard, and only then, with his back to her, did some of the iron go out of his shoulders. She saw it, the small unclenching of a man who had been braced for a fight, and had this time been spared it. "Your father offered him coin. I offered him nothing at all. But he looked at the two of us, and he understood which of us he'd rather have owe him a favor, and which of us he'd rather not cross, and he made his choice. That's power, Amelia. It's not a fist. It's the innkeeper doing arithmetic and landing on your side of it before you've said a word." He turned back to her. "It's an ugly thing to have. It's an uglier thing to need. But tonight it kept you out of your father's men's hands, and I'll not apologize for it." Amelia lowered her hands from her face. "I don't want you to apologize for it," she said. "I want to understand it, because I've spent my whole life being saved by it and sold by it and never once holding it. My father's power kept me warm and fed, and it also handed me across a table like a deed to a field. Your power got me up that stair alive. I've been on both ends of the same thing my whole life and never in the middle of it. And I'm tired, Nathaniel. I'm tired of being a thing that power happens to." Nathaniel looked at her for a long moment. "Then here," he said, and crossed the small room and did something she did not expect. He drew a folded paper from inside his coat. The letter she realized her father's letter, the terms of the arrangement, the paper with both their names on it, and he held it out to her. "You should have this, not me. It's about you as much as it is about me, and you've never once been allowed to read the thing that decided your whole life. Read it. Then you'll hold at least one piece of the power that's been thrown around over your head. You'll know what he wrote. You'll know what he thinks you're worth." His voice was very even. "It won't be comfortable, but you asked to stand in the middle instead of the ends. This is the middle. It's not a kind place." Amelia looked at the paper in his gloved hand. She almost didn't take it. Everything in her flinched from it, from seeing in her father's own precise and hated hand the number he'd put on her, the debt she'd been meant to erase, the cold accounting of a daughter turned into a payment. Nathaniel had read one just like it about himself 3 winters ago in his father's study, and it had broken something in him and built something else. She understood now that he was not handing her a paper. He was handing her the same thing that had made him, and warning her honestly that it would cost. She took it, she unfolded it, she read, and Nathaniel Ashford stood by the window and watched her face and said nothing and let her have it, the whole of it unsoftened, the way no one had ever let her have anything, her whole life. While outside the last of the summer rain finally stopped, and the night went quiet, and somewhere far behind them on the dark road her father's riders turned their horses north and rode on, carrying his coin and his fury and his certainty that a daughter was a thing that could be caught and brought back and made to pay. They did not yet know they were wrong. But Amelia Hartwell, reading her own price in her father's hand with a borrowed coat around her shoulders, and a strange and careful Duke watching over her in a lamplit room, was learning it line by line, and there was a look coming into her face as she read, slow and terrible and clear, that was not grief and was not fear, and was something Nathaniel had seen exactly once before in his life. He had seen it in a mirror 3 winters ago on the 3rd day when he'd finally stopped being grateful. "He wrote that I was biddable," Amelia said. Her voice had gone very quiet and very flat. "Here, in the terms. He recommends me to you as of a biddable and obedient temper, well suited to a great house." She looked up, and her eyes were dry, and that was somehow worse than tears. He was still writing that about me while I was upstairs deciding to run. He put it in the contract, my obedience, as a selling point, like good teeth on a horse. "Yes," Nathaniel said. "Did yours?" "Did mine what? Did your father write things like this, about you, when he sold you?" She held up the paper. "Did he have words for you too? Biddable, obedient, well-suited?" Nathaniel was silent for a long moment. "Steady," he said at last. "Mine wrote steady, and dutiful, and—" his mouth twisted, "and unlikely to trouble the arrangement with sentiment." That was his word for it. Sentiment. The part of me that might have wanted to marry for something other than a ledger. He wrote it into my terms as a reassurance, that his son wouldn't trouble anyone with a heart. Amelia folded the paper very carefully along its old creases. "They're the same man," she said. "Yours and mine. They never met, and they're the same man. Different houses, different states, different names, and the same exact man writing the same exact words about the two people they were supposed to love most in the world." She set the paper down on the bed beside her deliberately, the way you set down something you have decided you are finished being afraid of. Well-suited. Biddable. Unlikely to trouble the arrangement with sentiment. She looked up at him, and there it was again, that thing in her face, the thing he'd seen in the mirror. "I'm going to trouble it with everything I have, Nathaniel. Every last thing. I'm going to be so much sentiment they'll wish they'd never written the word." And Nathaniel Ashford, the steady, dutiful, souled and grateful, and finally, ungrateful. Duke of Ashford looked at the runaway heiress sitting on the narrow bed with her father's contract folded up beside her, and that fire coming up behind her eyes, and felt something move in his chest that he had spent 3 years and a lifetime before, that being trained not to feel. He did not name it. It was far too soon, and he was far too careful, and she trusted him too little, and rightly so. But he felt it, and for once he did not push it down. "Good," he said quietly. "So will I." A knock came at the door, then the girl with the supper timid and quick, and the moment shattered into ordinary things, plates and firelight, and the small business of 2 hunted people pretending for the benefit of a serving girl to be a duke and his quiet ward. Amelia kept her eyes down. She said nothing. She played it perfectly, and Nathaniel saw her play it, and when the girl had gone, he said, "You learn fast." And Amelia said, "I've been practicing being quiet my whole life. I'm only just now learning it can be a weapon instead of a cage." And something in the way she said it made him set down his cup and look at her for rather longer than he meant to. They ate. They spoke little. The fire burned down. And when at last the inn had gone silent around them, and the hour had grown very late, Nathaniel rose to go to the adjoining room, and paused at the door between them. "Bar this door behind me," he said. "Not against me. Against the world. If anything comes in the night, if you hear riders, if you hear my name, if you hear your name, you knock twice on this door hard, and I'll come through it. Do you understand?" "2 knocks," Amelia said. "I understand. And Amelia." He hesitated, and it was the first time all night she'd seen him hesitate at anything. "What you read tonight? What he wrote about you? It isn't true. You know that. But knowing a thing isn't true, and feeling it isn't true, are 2 different rooms, and you can live in the first for years before you ever get the door open to the second. I know. I've been trying to get that door open for 3 years. His iron eyes held hers. You got yours open in an hour. On a bed in a strange inn reading it cold. It took me 3 years, and I'm not sure I'm all the way through it yet. So whatever else happens on this road, whatever I turn out to be villain or not, I want you to know that I've never in my life seen anyone do the thing you did tonight as fast as you did it. And I've spent my whole life around powerful people. None of them could have done it. He was wrong about you, Amelia. He was wrong in every line. And before she could answer, before she could find any answer at all, to a thing like that, he stepped through the door and drew it shut and left her alone with the firelight and the folded contract and the strange, new, fierce thing burning quietly behind her ribs. Amelia sat for a long while. Then she rose and crossed the room and slid the bar across the door, not against him, as he'd said, but against the world. And she stood a moment with her hand flat against the wood on the other side of which a careful-souled, ungrateful duke was lying awake, because he did not sleep, because he had not slept in 3 years, because someone should watch the road. "Nathaniel," she said low through the door. A pause, then muffled, "Amelia." "Thank you," she said, "for the paper. It was the cruelest kind thing anyone's ever done for me. I don't know what to make of you at all. But thank you." There was a long silence on the other side of the door. "Sleep," he said at last, and his voice was rougher than she'd yet heard it. "Bars across. Roads watched. Sleep." And she did. But across the inn, in the tap room below, in the dying light of the last banked fire, the innkeeper who had done his arithmetic and landed on the Duke's side of it was standing very still, holding a second lantern and looking at a second horseman who had ridden into the yard. Not 10 minutes past a horseman who had not asked about a green dress or a dark-haired girl, because this horseman already knew exactly who was upstairs, and had not come for the reward at all. This horseman had come from Ashford Estate, and the letter he carried, sealed with the crest of a house Nathaniel Ashford believed he now commanded alone, bore a single line in a hand. The Duke would have known anywhere, because it was the hand of a man he had watched buried 3 winters ago. A man whose account books had broken and built him a man whose death he had never once in 3 years allowed himself to doubt. The innkeeper broke the seal because the horseman could not read and held the letter to the lantern and read the single line aloud in a whisper to the empty room. "Tell my son his father is not dead, and the debt is not what he believes." Upstairs behind a barred door, the runaway heiress slept the first dreamless sleep of her life, and the Duke, who was not sleeping, lay awake watching a road he thought he understood. And neither of them knew that the true shape of the trap they were caught in had not yet even begun to show itself, and that everything they had told each other tonight about fathers who sold their children had been in one terrible particular a lie that Nathaniel Ashford had been telling himself for 3 long years. The knock did not come as 2 soft raps in the night. It came as boots on the stair before dawn, and the innkeeper's voice raised in the hall, and then a fist against the door of the adjoining room. Nathaniel's room, and a horseman's voice, saying words that Amelia, jolting awake behind her barred door, could not at first make sense of. Your Grace, forgive me, but you'll want to read this. It's come from the estate. It's come from Sir, I don't know how to say it. It's come in your father's hand." Amelia was up and at the connecting door with her ear against the wood before she'd fully surfaced from sleep. She heard nothing on the other side, no answer, no movement, just the horseman's ragged breathing, and beneath it a silence so complete and so wrong that she felt it in her own chest like a held breath. "Nathaniel," she said through the door. 2 knocks hard the way he'd told her. "Nathaniel, what is it?" Still nothing. She unbarred her door and went out into the hall in her stocking feet, with the wool coat clutched around her, and she found him standing in the open doorway of his own room, with a single sheet of paper in his hand and a look on his face she had not seen there once in the whole long night. Not on the road, not at the lanterns, not reading his own price in his father's ledgers 3 years gone. Every particle of the careful, cold, bored authority he wore like armor had drained clean out of him. What was left underneath was a boy. Nathaniel. He did not look at her. He was looking at the paper. "It's his hand," he said. His voice had gone strange and small. "Amelia, it's his hand. I buried him. I stood at the grave. I signed the papers. I read the account books after. It's his hand." The horseman, a mud-spattered young man, swaying with exhaustion, looked between them helplessly. "The steward gave it me at the estate, Your Grace. Said it came to the house sealed. Said it was to reach you before you arrived, before anyone else could—" "Out," Nathaniel said. "Sir, out, downstairs. Wait, say nothing to anyone. Go." The horseman went, and Nathaniel Ashford stepped back into his room and sat down hard in the chair by the cold hearth, still holding the paper, as though it might come alive in his hands, and Amelia followed him in and shut the door and stood in front of him and did the only thing she could think to do, which was the thing no one had ever done for her. She knelt down in front of him, so he'd have to look at her. "Read it to me," she said. "Out loud, whatever it is. You shouldn't hold a thing like that alone, and I'm the only one here, so read it to me. Now." He looked at her. And then, in a voice that shook and steadied and shook again, the Duke of Ashford read his dead father's letter aloud. "My son, if you are reading this, then you have run, as I always knew, that one day you finally would. And the man I paid to watch the roads has done his work and sent word, and this letter has been loosed to find you. Understand me, I am not dead. The grave you stood over held a coffin weighted with sand and stone. The death you mourned was a transaction the same as everything else between us has ever been, and I will explain it to you now, because you have at last done the one thing I needed you to do, which is to leave." Nathaniel stopped. His jaw worked. Amelia did not move, did not speak, did not touch him. She only knelt there and held his eyes and let him find the strength to go on. The debts were real, he read. Hartwell's note was real, but the marriage was never the price of the debt. The marriage was the price of your obedience. So long as you believed yourself sold to save 400 souls, you would never leave the estate, never look into the true accounts, never learn what I have hidden in the north wing these 30 years. I needed you bound. Grief binds better than any chain, and a debt to the dead binds better still. So I died. And I watched from a distance. A father is permitted to see whether my son would spend the rest of his life honoring a ghost, or whether in the end he had enough of me in him to finally say no and run and come looking for the truth. Amelia's hand rose to her mouth. "You have run." Nathaniel read, and his voice broke fully now, and he did not try to hide it. "I confess, I did not expect to feel what I felt when the word reached me. Pride, perhaps, or its cousin. Come to the estate, Nathaniel. Come to the north wing. There is a thing there that is worth more than the debt, more than the marriage, more than every acre of Ashford land, and it has been yours by right since the day you were born, and I have kept it from you for 30 years, for reasons you will not forgive, and I will not ask you to. Come home. Your father is waiting. And this time, my son, this time come as a man who chose it, and not as a boy I sold." The letter ended. The room was utterly silent. Amelia stayed kneeling on the cold floor in front of him, and Nathaniel Ashford sat with his dead father's living words in his shaking hands. And for a long, long moment, neither of them said anything at all, because there was nothing in the whole world large enough to say. Then Nathaniel made a sound she would never forget, a single cracked, terrible laugh, with no laughter in it anywhere. 3 years, he said. 3 years, Amelia. I grieved him for 3 years. I sat in his study, and I wept over his ledgers. I stopped sleeping. I built my whole everything. I am everything I've done since I built it on the ground of his grave. And he was watching. He faked his own death to see if I'd disappoint him one last time." The laugh came again, worse. "And the terrible thing, the thing I can't, Amelia, the terrible thing is that he wrote pride. He wrote that he felt pride when I ran. And I hate him. God help me, I have never hated anyone the way I hate him at this moment. And some rotted, ruined 7-year-old part of me that he built and never let grow up is sitting in my chest right now, glad. Glad that I finally did the thing that made him proud. After everything. After all of it. I'm glad. What kind of man does that make me? A man whose father spent 40 years teaching him that his own worth lived inside another person's approval," Amelia said, quietly, fiercely. "You told me that yourself last night. He got into your head, that's what you said. Well, this is what it looks like, Nathaniel, when a man like that gets into your head so deep that he can reach up out of a grave he isn't even in and still make you glad. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you hurt. Those aren't the same. You taught me that too. Knowing a thing isn't true and feeling it isn't true are two different rooms. You're in the first room right now. You know he's monstrous. You'll get to the second room. It just takes longer than a morning." Nathaniel looked at her. "You're throwing my own words back at me," he said. "You gave me good ones. I'm not going to waste them. And despite everything, despite the letter, despite the grave that held sand and stone, despite 3 stolen years, something eased in his face. Not much, but enough. He wants me to come to the estate, Nathaniel said. The north wing, whatever's there. Yes, it's a trap. You understand that. Everything that man has ever done to me has been a trap dressed as a gift. The grief was a trap. The marriage was a trap. This letter is bait, and the north wing is the jaws, and if I ride to Ashford Estate, I'm riding exactly where he's wanted me the whole time. His iron eyes came up. And I'm going to go anyway, because I have to know. Because he's counted on that too, counted on the fact that I could no more turn away from that door than stop breathing. He's built me too well. I hate it. And I'm going to walk straight into it because there is no version of me, none that could ride to Boston knowing that letter existed and never open that door. Then you're not walking into it alone, Amelia said. Amelia, no. She rose from the floor and stood over him, and there was no give in her at all. You listen to me now the way I listen to you. My father's men are on every road between here and Boston with coin on my head. Your father, your living father, has been watching the roads and paying men to send letters chasing after you. There is no safe direction for either of us. There's no Boston where I'm free, and no road where you're whole. There is only forward into the thing that's hunting both of us, and I would 10,000 times rather walk into the jaws of it beside a man who told me the whole truth of what we're walking into than sit in an inn in Virginia waiting to be caught by a father who called me biddable in a contract. Her voice dropped and steadied, and became the most certain thing in the room. You handed me my price in your own hand last night, and warned me it would cut. Now I'm handing you mine. I'm coming to Ashford Estate. Not because you need protecting, you don't. You're the most dangerous man I've ever met, and I mean that as the only compliment I've got. I'm coming because I've spent my whole life being sent away from the rooms where my life was decided, and I am done being sent away. And if the room where our lives get decided is a north wing with your risen father in it, then that Nathaniel Ashford is exactly the room I intend to be standing in. Nathaniel stared up at her. You've known me one night, he said. I've known men my whole life who I couldn't trust across a dinner table, Amelia said. And I've known you one night, and you've told me every ugly true thing about yourself before I could find it out on my own. And you handed me a paper that cut me open because you thought I had a right to bleed from the truth instead of the lie. One night of that is worth more than a lifetime of the other. So don't tell me I've only known you a night. Tell me you'll let me come. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then he reached out, and it was the first time he had touched her since the wrist he'd grabbed in the dark to keep her from screaming at the lanterns, and he took her hand, gloved fingers around her bare ones, and held it not tightly. Just held it the way a man holds the one solid thing in a world that has just come apart. I spent 3 years thinking I had no family left in the world, he said. This morning I found out my father is alive, and it's the worst news I've ever had. And in the same hour, I found out that a woman who fell through my carriage door in a thunderstorm one night ago will walk into the jaws of my father's trap rather than let me do it by myself. His voice was very rough. Amelia, I don't have anywhere to put a thing like that. He never taught me where a thing like that goes. I only know I don't want you to come, because it isn't safe, and I've never in my life wanted anything the way I want you to come. Both. At once. And I don't know what to do with it. You don't do anything with it, Amelia said gently. You just let it be there. That's the second room. You're standing in the doorway of it right now. And the Duke of Ashford, who did not weep, who had not slept in 3 years, who had been built by a living ghost to have no sentiment to trouble any arrangement with, bowed his head over the runaway heiress's hand, in a cold room in a wayside inn, and let it be there. They rode out an hour after dawn. Nathaniel sent the exhausted horsemen back to the estate ahead of them, with instructions to tell no one anything, to say only that the Duke was coming and coming soon, and that the north wing was to be left exactly as it was. He paid the innkeeper twice what the reward would have been, not for silence, he told Amelia, but so that if her father's men came asking again, the innkeeper would have a reason of his own to keep lying that had nothing to do with fear. "Fear breaks," Nathaniel said, as the carriage pulled out of the yard. "Self-interest holds." Lesson 2. Never buy a man's silence with fear if you can buy it with greed. The greedy man protects you to protect himself. The frightened man only protects you until someone frightens him worse. "You're still teaching me," Amelia said. "Even now, even after that letter." "Especially after that letter." His jaw was set. "Because I'm about to walk you into the worst thing my family has ever built, and if I don't come out of it, someone has to know how the world actually works. It might as well be the only person in it I'd trust to use it well." Amelia's throat tightened. "Don't talk like you're not coming out of it." "I'm talking like a man who's careful," Nathaniel said. "You'll recall we discussed the difference." The road north was faster now, the storm long gone, the summer sun climbing hard and bright over the drying country, and Nathaniel drove them hard, because there was no longer any reason to go slow. The thing at the end of the road was no longer something they were fleeing, but something they were racing toward, and it changed everything about how the miles felt. Amelia watched the change come over him hour by hour. The grief and the shock of the morning burned off, and underneath it, tempered by it, something harder and clearer was forming. He was not the sold, grateful boy of the letter. He was not even the careful, cold duke of the carriage. He was becoming, mile by mile, a man walking knowingly into his father's trap, with his eyes wide open and choosing to, and there was a kind of terrible freedom in it that Amelia recognized because she'd felt it herself the night she ran. "He said there's a thing in the north wing," she said somewhere in the long afternoon. "Worth more than the debt, worth more than the marriage. Yours by right since the day you were born." She looked at him. "What do you think it is?" "I've been asking myself that for 6 hours." And Nathaniel was quiet for a mile. "When I was a boy," he said slowly. "Before my mother died, I was 7 when she died, the same age as the part of me that's still glad he's proud. Which I don't think is an accident. Before she died, she used to talk about a room in the north wing that was locked. Always locked. She'd go quiet when she passed the door of it. Once I asked her what was inside, and she looked at me with a face I've never forgotten, and she said, 'Your father's true fortune, and the only thing in this house he's ever been afraid of.' And then she died, and I forgot about it, the way you forget the strange things your mother says when you're 7. His hands tightened on the reins. "But I've been remembering it all afternoon. The only thing in this house he's ever been afraid of. And now he's faked his own death and hidden for 3 years and hunted me across 2 states to bring me to that exact wing, to a thing that's mine by right and that he's kept from me for 30 years. He looked at her, and his iron eyes were bright and hard. "I think whatever's behind that door is the reason he's done all of it, Amelia. I think it's the reason he sold me and faked his death and built me the way he built me. I think everything my father has ever done to me has been in the service of keeping me on the wrong side of one locked door. And I've spent 30 years being the lock." Amelia felt the hair rise on her arms. "Then we open it," she said. "Then we open it." They reached the estate as the sun was going down. Amelia had expected she did not know what she'd expected. Grandeur, perhaps. A fortress. Something to match the man. What she had not expected was how still it was. No servants in the yard. No lights but one burning in a single high window of the far wing, the north wing she understood without being told. The whole vast house held its breath, and the one light burned, and Nathaniel drew the carriage to a halt in the empty court and sat for a moment, with his hands on the reins, looking up at that single lit window, and Amelia watched 30 years move across his face. "He's up there," Nathaniel said. "Behind that light, my father. Alive. Waiting to see if I've come as a man who chose it or a boy he sold." His voice was very quiet. "And the terrible thing, Amelia, the thing I have to tell you before we go in, is that I don't entirely know which one is going to walk through that door. I've spent 30 years being the boy. I've had one night and one morning of being the man. and he built the boy very, very well. He turned to her. So I need you to do something for me. In there. Whatever happens. If you see the boy start to win, if you see me start to bend toward him, start to be glad again, start to reach for his approval, like a hand reaching for the fire. That's always burned it. I need you to say my name. Just my name. The way you said it this morning, kneeling on that floor. Because that's the only voice in 30 years that's ever pulled me toward the man instead of the boy, and I'm going to need it. And I'm too proud to ask for it once we're through that door. So I'm asking now. Will you? Amelia looked at him. Her heart was pounding, the old pounding, the fear, and the new one too, the one she still had no name for. I'll say it 100 times if I have to, she said. I'll say it until you hear it. You pulled me out of a storm and taught me how to lie to soldiers and handed me the truth even when it cut. You watched the road all night so I could sleep. I'll say your name in that room until the walls come down, Nathaniel. That's not even a favor. That's the easiest thing you've ever asked me. Something moved in his face, that warmth again, the dangerous one held down, and this time, not entirely. When this is over, he said, whatever's behind that door, whatever my father is, whatever he's done, however it ends. He stopped, started again, and it cost him. She could see it cost him, this man who'd been built with no place to put such things. I want you to know that of every terrible and impossible thing that has happened to me since 3 winters ago, the only one I would not undo is the storm that drove you into my carriage. That's all. I needed to say it before we go in case the room takes something from us that I can't get back. You didn't run into the wrong carriage, Amelia. I've decided. Of everything that's true tonight, that's the truest. You ran into the right one. Amelia's eyes filled. She did not let the tears fall she'd promised herself. Hadn't she that morning on the road that her tears were done being currency? But she let him see them standing in her eyes because he had shown her his and never once been ashamed. Then let's go find out, she said, what your father was so afraid of. And Nathaniel Ashford climbed down from the carriage and came around and handed her down the way he had at the inn, but not the way he had at the inn, because at the inn it had been a performance. A duke and his ward, and this was something else. This was 2 people who had walked into each other in a thunderstorm and were about to walk together into the thing at the center of both their ruined lives. He kept her hand. He did not let it go. And together they crossed the empty court toward the great dark house with its single burning window, toward the north wing, toward the locked door and the living ghost, and the thing that had been Nathaniel's by right since the day he was born. The great door of the house stood unbarred. Nathaniel pushed it open, and they stepped into a hall, lit by one candle set on the floor, at the foot of a staircase, as though left there deliberately, to mark a path up and up toward the north wing, toward the light. And pinned beneath the candle was a single sheet of paper, weighted so the draft from the open door wouldn't take it, and Nathaniel bent and drew it out and read it, and Amelia watched his face go from that hard, ready clarity straight back into the stunned white blankness of the morning, all in the space of a single breath. What? She said. Nathaniel, what does it say? He didn't answer. Nathaniel, she said sharp. His name the way he'd asked her to, and it worked. It pulled his eyes up to hers, but there was no relief in them now, only a horror she didn't understand. It's not from my father, he said. Then who? It's from Hartwell. His voice was barely a voice at all. It's from your father, Amelia. He's here. He's been here the whole time. He's in the north wing. Nathaniel's hand was shaking so hard the paper trembled. It says my father didn't fake his death alone. It says the 2 of them did it together. 30 years of debt, the marriage, the grave, the letter that brought me running, all of it. Our fathers built it, together. They've known each other for 30 years, and the thing behind the locked door, the thing that's mine by right. He looked up at her and the bottom dropped out of the whole world. Amelia, it says the thing behind that door is you. That's not possible, Amelia said. But her voice had gone thin, and she heard it go thin, and Nathaniel heard it too, and the paper trembled between his fingers, because they both already knew that in a night that had held sand in a coffin and a dead man's living hand, not possible had stopped meaning anything at all. "Read it to me," she said. "The way I made you read the other one. All of it. Don't spare me a word." Nathaniel's jaw worked, and then in the guttering candlelight at the foot of the stair, he read her father's letter aloud. "To the Duke of Ashford, and to my daughter whom I know is standing beside him, for if she is not, then the whole of 30 years' work has failed, and I do not believe it has. Amelia. You will want to hate me more after you read this than you did when you ran. I understand, but you have never once in your life known the truth of who you are, and tonight you will, because tonight is the only night it can no longer be kept from you." Nathaniel's voice caught. He pressed on. "You are not my daughter by blood." The words dropped into the dark hall, and Amelia felt them land somewhere beneath her ribs in a place she had not known was empty, until something was thrown into it. "You were born in the north wing of this house 30 years ago, number 22 years ago. In the north wing of Ashford Estate, to a woman whose name you will learn tonight, from the only 2 men left alive who knew her. You were given to me as an infant to raise as my own in Virginia, far from here, under a name that was never truly yours. Hartwell is a coat you were dressed in. It was never your skin. And the debt, the marriage, the arrangement I sold you into, all of it, every line was built for one purpose, only to bring you back to this house, to this wing, to the door of the room where you were born, on the arm of the one man in the world who had a right to walk you through it. And he has. Look beside you, Amelia. He walked you home. He simply never knew that home was you." Amelia could not breathe. "Stop," she whispered. "Nathaniel, stop. I can't." But he couldn't stop either, because there was one line left, and his eyes had already found it, and the reading of it took the last of the color from his face. "Come up," he read. "Both of you. Your fathers are waiting. And the woman who bore you, Amelia, she is waiting too. She has been waiting 22 years. She is alive. She is behind the locked door, and she is the only person in this house who never agreed to any of it." The letter fell from Nathaniel's hand. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The candle guttered. Somewhere far above them, in the one lit room of the whole silent house, a floorboard shifted under a living weight. "My mother," Amelia said. The word came out of her like it had been pulled up from the bottom of a well. "I have a mother. Alive. Up there. Nathaniel. I grew up believing my mother died bearing me. He told me that. My whole life. He told me it was my fault she was gone. Every cold thing he ever did, every time he couldn't look at me, I thought it was because I killed her being born." Her voice shattered. "And she's alive. She's been alive the whole time. 22 years. Behind a door. In your house. Amelia, he let me carry that." She was shaking now the way she'd shaken in the carriage. But this was different. This was rage and grief braided together into something that could level a house. 22 years he let me believe I was a murderer at birth. He looked at me across every dinner table of my childhood and let me believe my own mother's blood was on my hands, and the whole time she was alive, and he knew, and it was a lock. Nathaniel, it was all a lock. My guilt was a lock, the same as your grief was a lock. She caught his eyes, and the horror in her face doubled as the shape of it came clear. "They used the same key, on both of us. Your father made grief a chain. My father made guilt a chain. And they built it together, 30 years. 2 little architects in 2 different states building the exact same prison out of the 2 of us, so that one day we'd walk up that staircase holding hands." "Yes," Nathaniel said. His voice was hollow. "That's exactly what they did." "Then I don't want to go up there." He looked at her. "I don't," she said, and now the tears were coming and she let them, because there was no currency left to spend. There was only the truth of it flooding out of her. "Don't you see what they've done? Every single thing I've felt tonight, the running, the fear, the choosing, you every bit of it they counted on. You said your father built you too well. Well, mine built me too well too. And I ran exactly the direction they wanted, into exactly the carriage they wanted, toward exactly this door. And even you, Nathaniel, even the one true thing, Even the man who told me the truth when it cut, even you might be part of the lock. How do I know? How do I know you're not the last chain, the kind one? The one that finally makes me walk willingly up a staircase I'd never climb at gunpoint. How do I know the storm wasn't arranged too? The words hit him like a blow. She saw them hit. And for one terrible second, she watched the doubt of it move across his own face, because he was asking himself the same thing. She realized he'd been asking it since the letter fell. Was I a piece of it too? Was the one clean thing in my life also built by him? And then, Nathaniel Ashford did the bravest thing she had seen anyone do in her whole life. He didn't defend himself. "You can't know," he said. "That's the honest answer, and I promised you honest even when it cuts, so here it is. You can't know. I can't know. They're that good, both of them, and if I stood here and swore to you that the storm was real and my heart is real, and I'm not the last chain, that oath would be worth exactly nothing, because a chain would say the same, so I won't swear it." He took a step toward her and stopped deliberately, keeping the space between them, because he understood she saw him. Understand that reaching for her now would be its own kind of argument, and he wanted her free of arguments. "I'll say something else instead. Even if I am the last chain, even if my father built me to be the kind hand that walks you up that stair, then the way you break the chain isn't to run from me, Amelia. It's to walk up the stair for a reason that's yours. Not because you love me, not because you trust me, not because the storm drove you here. Because your mother is alive, and she never agreed to any of it, and she has been waiting 22 years behind a door in the dark for the one person who was stolen from her. That reason isn't theirs. They built a lock out of your guilt. They can't build one out of her being real. That part they didn't invent. That part is just true. And you get to walk toward a true thing on your own 2 feet, the way you ran on them the night you left. Not because I'm beside you, because she's up there." Amelia stared at him through her tears. "You just talked yourself out of being the reason I go up," she said. "You just argued yourself right out of it. Any other man in the world would be trying to make me need him right now." "I don't want you to need me," Nathaniel said roughly. "I've been needed my whole life by an estate, by 400 souls, by a father who needed me obedient. Being needed is just being owned with better manners. I don't want to own one more inch of you than you hand me yourself freely, knowing everything. So no, I won't be your reason. Go up for her. And if there's an after, you decide there's room in your life for a man who fell in love with you in a carriage before he knew you were the thing his own father buried in a locked room, then you tell me, in your own time, on your own 2 feet, and not 1 second before." The word hung in the air between them. Love. He hadn't meant to say it. She saw that too, saw it land in his own ears a half second after it left him, saw the flicker of a man who had just handed over the one card he'd been holding at the worst possible moment, in the worst possible house, with both their fathers waiting at the top of the stairs. "You didn't mean to say that," Amelia said. "No," Nathaniel said. "But I meant it. Those are different rooms too." And that of all the things in that impossible night was what finally steadied her. Not comfort, not certainty, just the sight of the most careful man she'd ever met being helplessly badly honest at exactly the moment it could cost him most. A chain wouldn't do that, she thought. A chain would be smooth. A chain would say the perfect thing. Only a real and frightened man says the true thing at the wrong time, and then stands there having said it. "All right," she said. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist, the way she had the blood in the carriage, and something in her went from shaking to still. "All right. I'm going up. For her. Not for you, and not for them, and not because I'm sure of anything. For a woman I've never met who's been waiting 22 years. She looked at him. "But you're coming with me. Not as my reason, as my witness. Because when I walk into that room, I want one person there who chose me before he knew I was the prize. Whatever else you are, Nathaniel Chain or man, you're the only person alive who wanted me when I was nobody. When I was just a wet girl in a green dress falling through a door. So you come, and you watch, And you remember what my face looks like the moment I meet my mother, so that no matter what those two men up there try to make it mean, there's one witness in the world who saw it be mine." Nathaniel Ashford looked at her for a long moment. "That," he said very quietly, "is the least owned I have ever heard a person be, in my whole life, standing at the bottom of the one staircase built to own you both, and you've made even this a thing you chose." He held out his hand not to lead her. She understood, but so that going up, she wouldn't go up alone. "Come on then, let's go be free in the worst possible place for it." They climbed the stairs together. The house was silent around them, vast and dark, and holding its breath, and the single candle at the top of the stair burned steadier as they rose toward it, and the light under the far door grew. Amelia's heart was a drum. Nathaniel's hand was steady in hers, and she understood that he was making it steady, that underneath the steadiness, his own 3-year-old grief for a father who wasn't dead was screaming, and that he was climbing toward the man who'd stolen 3 years of his life for the same reason she was, because the truth was up there, and they had both spent their whole lives being kept in rooms adjacent to the truth, and neither of them would be kept out one more night. At the top of the stair, the door to the north wing stood open, and in the room beyond it, 3 people were waiting. 2 of them were men. Amelia knew them both at a glance. One was her father, Magistrate Hartwell, standing by the cold hearth with his hands folded and his face arranged into something that was trying to be tenderness and only managed to be strategy. The other seated in a great chair by the window, older, grayer, but unmistakable in the way his iron eyes matched the ones holding Amelia's hand. The other could only be the Duke's dead father. Alive. Watching his son come through the door with the exact expression of a man checking a sum he'd been working for 30 years and finding it at last balanced. And the third person in the room was a woman. She was standing apart from both men near the far wall, and she was thin, the way a person gets thin who has been kept, and her hair had gone gray early, and her hands were pressed together at her breast, as though she were holding her own heart in place. And the moment Amelia came through the door, the woman made a sound. Not a word. A sound. The sound a person makes when they have imagined a moment 10,000 times across 22 years, and it is finally unbearably happening. And Amelia, who had walked up the stairs for exactly this and still was not ready for it, who had braced for the 2 men and their 30 years of architecture. Amelia looked at the gray thin woman with her hands at her breast and knew her. Not from memory. She had no memory. She'd been an infant. She knew her the way you know your own face in a glass you've never seen before. "Mother," Amelia said, and the whole vast machine those 2 men had spent 30 years building, the debt, the grave, the marriage, the guilt, the grief, the storm, the carriage, the lock upon lock upon lock. The whole thing cracked straight down the middle in a single word, because it was a word neither architect had ever been able to script, spoken by a daughter to a mother across a room, and there is no lock in the world strong enough to hold against a thing that true. "They said," the woman began, and her voice was ruined 22 years unused for this. "They said you'd come as a stranger. They said you wouldn't, that you couldn't possibly know me." "I don't know you," Amelia said, and she was crossing the room now, past the 2 men, past all 30 years of them. "I don't remember one single thing about you, and I've been told my whole life you were dead and that I killed you, and I still knew you the second I came through that door. So they were wrong. Do you hear me? They were wrong about that too." And then she reached her mother, and there were no more words. Only 2 people who should never have been parted holding on to each other in the middle of the room, built to keep them apart. And Nathaniel Ashford stood in the doorway and did the thing she'd asked of him. He witnessed it. He watched her face. He fixed it in himself, the exact look of a stolen daughter finding her stolen mother, before either of the 2 men in the room could open their mouths and try to make it mean something else, so that whatever came next, there would be one person alive who had seen it be nothing but true. Magistrate Hartwell moved first. "Amelia?" he said, and his voice was smooth, the voice she'd heard read out accounts her whole life. "I know how this must look, but everything I did to bring you here, to her. You have to understand." "Say her name," Amelia said, without letting go of her mother, without even turning around. Hartwell stopped. What? You just called me Amelia. You've called me that my whole life. It was never even my name. You said so yourself in the letter. Hartwell is a coat I was dressed in, so say her name. She turned now at last, still holding her mother's hand, and her eyes were terrible. You stole a woman's child and raised it under a false name, and told the child its mother was dead by its own hand. 22 years. So, before you explain to me how it was all for my own good, before you tell me what I have to understand, you say this woman's name out loud in front of me, and you say what you did to her, and you don't get to dress it in a single soft word. Her name. Now. The magistrate's smooth face flickered, and in his flicker, in his hesitation, in the way his eyes cut sideways toward the old duke in the chair, Amelia saw the last piece of it. The piece neither letter had told the piece. The two of them had meant to explain slowly, in their own time, dressed in their own soft words. You don't know her name, Amelia said slowly. Do you? You raised me 22 years. You built all of this, and you don't actually know her name, because she was never a person to you either. She was just what? The other half of the debt. The thing you had to keep locked up so the lie would hold. She looked at the old duke now, and her voice dropped to something quiet and lethal. So it's you. It's your house. It's your north wing. She's been kept here all these years, not in Virginia. Which means it was never Hartwell who locked her away. It was you. It was Ashford. And Nathaniel's father. The pieces were landing now fast, one after another, and each one struck harder than the last. Didn't just fake his death to trap his son. He faked it to keep her. Because a dead man can't be charged with keeping a woman in a locked room for 22 years. A dead man is beyond the law. He didn't die to bind Nathaniel. He died to disappear, so that no one would ever come looking for the woman in the north wing, because the only man who'd stolen her was in the ground. The room had gone utterly silent. Nathaniel in the doorway made a low sound. Father, he said, is that true? The old Duke of Ashford looked at his son for the first time since he'd entered. Really looked at him, and something moved behind the iron eyes that were so exactly like Nathaniel's own. Sit down, my son, the old man said. There is a great deal you don't understand, and you will understand it better sitting than standing. Is it true? Nathaniel did not move from the doorway. His voice was shaking. You didn't do all this for a fortune or an estate, or even to make a man of me. You did it to hide a woman you stole. Every letter, every lock, 3 years of my grief. The whole you turned my life into a wall around your crime. Answer me. Is it true? The old Duke was quiet for a long moment. Her name, he said at last softly, is Eleanor. The gray woman flinched at the sound of it, at hearing it in that mouth after so long. Her name is Eleanor, the old Duke went on, and she is not Amelia's mother by any accident, and she is not a woman I stole for any reason as simple as the ones my son is imagining in that doorway. I loved her. Once. Before your mother Nathaniel. Before any of it. And she... For the first time, the old man's voice failed just slightly. Just enough. She chose someone else. She chose Hartwell. And the child she bore was his, and I could not... He stopped. Started again. I have spent 30 years unable to say the true sentence, so I will say it now in front of everyone, and let it do what it does. I could not bear that the one thing I ever wanted had been given to another man. So I took it. The child. And then when she came looking for the child, I took her too. And then when the whole of it grew too large to hide, I took my own name off the earth and buried it in a coffin full of sand, so that the crime would be buried with the criminal, and I could keep them both, the woman and the daughter, in the dark forever, where no living man could reach them. His iron eyes lifted, and they were wet and terrible and old. I did not build a lock out of your grief to make a man of you, Nathaniel. That was the lie I told myself, so I could sleep. I built it to make you my jailer without your knowing it. You have guarded this house, guarded them for 3 years, and never once known it. My grief-broken son, keeping the door I needed, kept asking no questions, because a grieving man asks no questions. That is what I did to you. And that is the truth, and it is worse than anything you imagined in that doorway, and I am done at last being unable to say it." The silence after that was the silence of a house that has held a lie so long it has forgotten how to hold anything else, finally letting go. Nathaniel stood in the doorway and shook. "You made me the lock," he said. "On a woman's cage, for 3 years. Yes. You let me weep at your empty grave so I'd guard the room where you were keeping a stolen woman and her stolen child. Yes, and Amelia." Nathaniel's voice broke fully now. "You knew. When Hartwell's letter came proposing the marriage, you knew who she was. You knew she was Eleanor's daughter, the daughter you stole and then gave back to Hartwell to raise so you could keep the mother. And when the two of you decided to bring her home to this house, to this wing, you arranged for her to come on the arm of your own son, so that even her homecoming would be one more thing you controlled." He was weeping openly now, and he did not care 3 years of grief for a living monster pouring out of him at last. "You didn't just steal her mother. You steered her whole life. You steered mine. You made 2 children into keys and locks for each other, and you called it a marriage." "Yes," the old Duke said. "All of it. Yes." And then Amelia let go of her mother's hand, and crossed the room, and stood in front of the old Duke of Ashford in his great chair, and looked down at the man who had stolen her mother, and her name, and her whole understanding of herself. "Get up," she said. The old man blinked. "Child. Don't call me child. Get up." Her voice was very quiet and very clear, and it filled the whole room. "You've sat in that chair for 30 years pulling strings. You faked your death sitting down. You confessed your whole rotten life just now sitting down comfortable in your own house in front of the woman you caged, and the daughter you stole, and the son you turned into a jailer. So no. Not one more word from that chair. If you're going to be the man who did all this, then be him, standing up on your feet in the open, the way the rest of us have had to live our whole lives. Get up." And the old Duke of Ashford, the architect, the ghost, the man who had moved 4 lives across 30 years, like pieces on a board, looked up at the 22-year-old woman he had stolen as an infant, standing over him with her mother's gray eyes and her own unbroken spine, and did the one thing in 3 decades that no one had made him do. He got up. He got up, and the moment he did, 30 years of power drained out of him, because a man who has ruled from a chair has nothing left standing but his own 2 legs, and his legs were old. "There," Amelia said. "Now you're just a man. Now we can begin." But it was Magistrate Hartwell who moved next, and quickly, because he was the cleverer of the 2, and he had felt the room turn, and he knew that a turning room must be steered before it settles somewhere he can't survive. "Amelia," he said, stepping forward with both hands open. "Listen to me. Whatever he did, whatever he's confessed, I am the one who raised you. 22 years. Every meal, every lesson, every dress, every book. He may have stolen you, but I kept you. I loved you as my own." "You told me I killed my mother," Amelia said. Hartwell stopped. "You want to talk about 22 years of meals and dresses? Let's talk about them. Every one of those meals I sat across a table from a man who knew my mother was alive in another man's house, and let me believe I'd murdered her by being born. You want credit for raising me? You raised me on a lie so heavy I nearly drowned in it. You raised me to flinch. You raised me to apologize for existing. Every book you gave me, you gave to the girl you'd convinced she was a killer, so she'd be too grateful for your kindness to ever question your cruelty." Her voice did not rise. It went lower and colder, and it was worse than any shout. "That's not raising a child, Hartwell. That's building a very obedient ghost. And then when the ghost turned 22 and was finally worth something, you sold her back to the man who'd started the whole lie. So no, you don't get to stand there with your hands open and count meals. I counted them for you. 22 years. And every single one was poison. I did what I had to. You had a choice," said a voice from across the room, and it was Eleanor's, ruined and thin and rising for the first time in 22 years to a thing that mattered. Both of you. Every single day. You had a choice, and every single day you chose the lie because the lie was comfortable and the truth would have cost you something. Don't you dare stand in this room and say you had to. I was in a locked room for 22 years, and even I had more choices than you're pretending to. I chose to keep believing my daughter was alive. I chose to keep her face in my mind when they wouldn't even tell me her name. I chose every single day in a room with a locked door, and you two chose every single day in the whole wide free world, and you chose this. So don't say you had to. Say you wanted to. At least be men enough to say you wanted to. The old Duke bowed his head. I wanted to, he said. They all looked at Hartwell, and the magistrate who had built a career on never once saying a true and costly sentence out loud looked at the woman he'd wronged and the daughter he'd poisoned and the man he'd conspired with, and for one moment something almost human crossed his face, and then it hardened, and Amelia knew before he opened his mouth that he was not going to be able to do it. I don't answer to a woman who's been locked in a room, Hartwell said coldly, and I don't answer to a girl I fed for 22 years. This is sentiment, and sentiment is what the two of you have always used to avoid the hard truths of the world. There are debts, there are estates, there are 400 souls on this land who eat because these arrangements hold. You can weep about locked doors all you like, but someone has to keep the accounts, and I have never once been thanked for being the man who does. Stop, Nathaniel said. He had not spoken in some time. He had been standing in the doorway weeping without shame, letting 3 years of false grief pour out of him. But something had changed in him while Hartwell spoke. Amelia saw it happen, saw the grief burn all the way down and leave something forged behind it. And when he stepped fully into the room at last, he was not the sold boy, and he was not even the careful Duke. He was the man he'd been afraid he couldn't be. He'd come as a man who chose it. He'd made it in the end up the stairs. You said 400 souls eat because these arrangements hold, Nathaniel said, and his voice was steady, now terribly steady. I've heard that sentence my whole life. My father used it too. It's the sentence you use to make a decent person guard a crime. You tell him that if he stops guarding it, the innocent will starve. It's the finest lock ever built, that sentence, because it turns a good heart into a jailer. It's the one that kept me here 3 years. He turned to his father. But I run the accounts now. I've run them for 3 years while you were pretending to be dead. And I know something you were counting on me never learning because you built me too well to ever look. The estate doesn't need this, any of it. The debt to Hartwell, I could have called it settled 2 years ago. The land pays for itself. The 400 souls eat because the land is good, not because 2 old men trade a woman back and forth in a locked room. You didn't keep them fed. You kept them hostage in a sentence to keep me obedient. And I just now stopped believing the sentence. His iron eyes were clear. So here's the truth of the accounts, Hartwell, since you love them so. The debt is forgiven. It's forgiven right now in this room, out loud in front of witnesses. There's nothing left holding Amelia to any arrangement. Nothing holding me to one either. You wanted to talk about what holds. Nothing holds. I just cut it. It's done. Hartwell went white. You can't. I'm the Duke of Ashford, Nathaniel said. My father made very sure the whole world knew it while he hid in this wing. Well, the whole world thinks I command this house, and for once the lie serves the truth because I do. He gave me the name to make me his jailer. I'm going to use it to open the cell. He looked at his father. Every door in this wing, unlocked. Tonight. Eleanor walks out the front of this house a free woman before the sun comes up. And if either of you raises a hand to stop her, I'll have the whole ugly story of a duke who faked his death to hide a stolen woman in front of every magistrate in 3 states. And Hartwell, you're a magistrate, so you understand exactly what that story does to both of you. You spent 30 years making sure no one could touch you. You did it by making me the wall. Well, the wall is done being a wall. The wall is a door now, and it's open. The old Duke looked at his son for a long, long moment. And then, impossibly unbearably, the old man's ruined face moved into something that was almost a smile. There he is, the old Duke said softly. There's the man. 30 years I waited to see if you had it in you." His iron eyes were wet. "You have no idea, do you, what it does to a father to raise a son deliberately weak and love him anyway, and wonder every single day whether the weakness you built would hold or break? I built you a prisoner, and prayed you'd become a warden of a different kind. And you have. You've become the man who opens the cell I spent my life locking. That is the one thing I did right, Nathaniel. I built you well enough that you could finally undo me, and you have, and I am—" The old man's voice cracked all the way through. "I am so proud." And Nathaniel Ashford stood in the room where his whole life had been engineered and felt the old rotted 7-year-old part of him leap up at that word proud, leap up the way it had leapt this morning at the letter, desperate, grateful, starving. And Amelia saw it happen. "Nathaniel," she said, just his name, the way she'd promised at the bottom of the stairs. And it reached him. He closed his eyes, he breathed, and when he opened them, the 7-year-old had let go. "No," Nathaniel said quietly to his father. "You don't get to be proud of me for this. You don't get to make even this one more thing you did on purpose. I didn't become this man because you built me too. I became this man in a thunderstorm in a carriage because a woman fell through my door and reminded me I was one. You had nothing to do with it. The one good thing in my life is the one thing you didn't arrange. And I know you didn't arrange it because if you had, if the storm was yours, if she was one more piece, then you'd have built her weaker. You'd have built her to lean on me, and she doesn't lean, father. She stands. You couldn't have made her. Only a free woman makes a woman like that. So no, you don't get to be proud. This one isn't yours. This one is mine." His voice was steel and mercy at once. "But I'll tell you what you do get. You get to watch her mother walk free. You get to spend whatever's left of your life knowing that the son you built to be your jailer became the man who let your prisoner go. And that's not pride, father. That's the bill. And it's finally due." The old Duke bowed his head and did not answer, and the not answering was the whole of his surrender. Amelia turned to her mother. Eleanor was trembling. 22 years of a locked door does not fall off a person in an hour, and Amelia took both her hands. "You heard him," Amelia said softly. "The door's open. You can walk out. Right now. Tonight." "I don't—" Eleanor's voice failed. "I don't know how. I don't remember how to be a person who isn't behind a door. I don't know who I am out there. I've spent so long being the woman they hid that I don't—" "I know," Amelia said. "I know exactly. Because I spent 22 years being the girl who killed her mother, and it turned out that girl was never real either. We were both somebody's lie, mother. Both of us. My whole life I was a false name and a false guilt. And your whole life you were a locked door, and neither of those was us. So we won't know who we are out there. Not at first. That's all right. We'll find out. Together. That's the part they can't build and can't lock and can't steal, the finding out. It's the one thing that was always going to be ours." She pressed her mother's hands to her own face, the way a child would the childhood she'd never gotten to have. "You waited 22 years for me. Let me spend the next 22 learning who you are. That's not a debt. That's not an arrangement. That's just a daughter and her mother walking out a door on their own 2 feet. And Eleanor made the sound again, the 10,000 times imagined sound, and this time there was a word in it, and the word was her daughter's true name. The name Hartwell had never known, and the old Duke had spoken only once the name Eleanor had kept alive in a locked room for 22 years. She said it. And Amelia heard for the first time in her life who she actually was. They walked out of the north wing together, mother and daughter, past the 2 old men, and neither Hartwell nor the Duke raised a hand because there was nothing left to raise it with. The whole machine had run down all 30 years of it, and what was left was just 2 aging men in an emptying house watching the thing they'd stolen walk itself back into the world. Nathaniel came last. At the door of the wing, he stopped and looked back at his father one final time. "The doors stay open," he said. "All of them. If I ever learn one lock in this house has been turned again, I'll bring the whole story to daylight, and I won't care what it costs me. Do you understand?" "I understand," the old Duke said. And then quietly, Nathaniel, whatever else I was, I did love you. Badly. Ruinously. In the only way a man like me knows how, which is to say the worst way there is. But I did. Nathaniel stood in the doorway for a moment. I believe you, he said. That's the tragedy of it. I believe you loved me, and you did all of this anyway. So let that be the thing you carry. Not that you didn't love me, that you did, and it changed nothing. That your love and your cruelty lived in the same house for 30 years, and the cruelty never once let the love come downstairs. He drew a breath. Goodbye, Father. And he walked out and left the old man standing alone in the room he'd built his whole life, to ruling nothing, now but the dark. Outside, the summer night had gone clear. The storm 3 days behind them, the sky washed and enormous over the Ashford land. Eleanor stood in the open court, breathing air that wasn't filtered through a locked window, her face turned up weeping, without a sound. Amelia stood beside her, one arm around her thin shoulders. And Nathaniel came down the steps and stopped a little apart from them, giving them the space the way he'd given her the coat in the carriage, near enough to matter, far enough to be free. Amelia looked over at him. You did it, she said. You came up the stairs as the man, not the boy. You said my name, Nathaniel said. Twice. It pulled me both times. I told you it was the only voice in 30 years that could. He looked at her, and there was something naked in his iron eyes, now the last of the armor gone. I said a thing at the bottom of those stairs that I shouldn't have said then. Wrong time, wrong house, both our fathers waiting. I want to say it again now in the right place in the open where nothing's locked, and no one arranged it. He didn't move closer. He wanted her to hear it standing free, not leaning. I fell in love with you in a carriage before I knew you were anything but a girl in a green dress. Before you were the prize, before you were Eleanor's daughter, before you were the thing my father spent 30 years steering toward this house. I loved you when you were nobody. When you were just the person who fell through my door and told me she'd rather die than be owned. That's the only version of loving you that isn't part of their machine, the version that started before any of us knew the machine was running. And it's yours if you want it, on your own 2 feet, in your own time. And if you don't, if you walk out of here with your mother and never look back and spend the next 22 years being nobody's anything, then that's the right ending too, and I'll be glad I got to witness it. Because I told you I'd be your witness. And a witness doesn't need anything back. Amelia looked at him for a long moment, and then she did the thing she'd promised herself on the road, that she would only ever do again by choosing it. She let go of her mother gently, and Eleanor understood and let her go. And she crossed the open court to Nathaniel Ashford on her own 2 feet, choosing every step, and she stopped in front of him and put her hand flat against his chest where the false grief had lived for 3 years, and the real thing lived now. I ran into the wrong carriage, she said. You did, and it was the only right thing that's happened to me in 22 years. Her eyes were bright and steady and free. You want to know if I'll have you? Here's my answer, and it's the only kind of answer I'll ever give again about anything for the rest of my life. Not because I need you, I don't. I'll never need any man again. You made sure of that. Yourself. You taught me being needed is just being owned with manners. Not because I'm grateful, I'm done paying men in gratitude. Not because the storm drove me here, or our fathers arranged it, or there's nowhere else to go. She curled her fingers into his coat. I'll have you because I choose you. Freely, knowing everything. Knowing you might be the last chain, and deciding you're not, because a chain doesn't argue itself out of being your reason, and a chain doesn't say I love you at the worst possible moment. And a chain doesn't stand in a doorway and witness a stolen woman meet her stolen daughter and ask for nothing back. Only a free man does those things. You're a free man, Nathaniel. You became one tonight, and a free man is the only kind I'll ever stand beside. Her voice dropped fierce and soft at once. So yes, I choose you, not as a bride sold to a duke, as a woman choosing a man in an open courtyard with nothing locked and no one watching, but the only 3 people in the world who ever truly loved either of us. That's my answer. It's mine. And it's the first thing in my whole life, that no one arranged. And Nathaniel Ashford, the sold boy, the careful Duke, the jailer who became the man who opened the cell, reached up and covered her hand with his. The way he had in the inn, the one solid thing in a world come apart. Except the world wasn't apart anymore. The world was for the first time exactly as true as it looked. "Then choose me," he said. "Every day, not once. Every day freely or not at all. That's the only marriage I'll ever want, the kind you could walk out of any morning and choose to stay in instead. No locks, no arrangements, no debt. Just two people who keep choosing on their own 2 feet until they're old." "Every day," Amelia said. "Freely or not at all." And behind them, Eleanor watched her daughter choose a man the way she herself had never been allowed to choose anything, and wept. But they were different tears now, and she knew the difference because she'd spent 22 years learning it. And somewhere in the dark house behind them, 2 old men sat with the ruin of 30 years, having learned too late the one thing that would have saved them all, that you cannot build a person into a possession, no matter how clever the lock, because the human heart was never made to be owned, and the moment it learns that the very moment no cage in the world can hold it. Amelia Hartwell had run into a stranger's carriage to escape being owned. She walked out of Ashford Estate having learned the truth that set her free. The truth her whole life had been built to keep from her, the truth that was worth more than the debt and the estate, and every acre of land that she had never been an object to begin with. That no one had ever had the right. That freedom was not escaping the cage. It was the moment you understood the cage had never been real, because you were never a thing that could be caged at all. She was nobody's heiress, nobody's payment, nobody's prize. She was her mother's daughter and her own woman, and the free choice of a free man. And she had chosen with her own hands on her own 2 feet in the open air. And that at last, no one could ever take from her again.